Hello and welcome to our Leadership for Change lecture. My name is Daniel and I'll be your host today along with my team Hilma, Isabel, Susanna, Jere, Julia, and Nelly. We are all first-year students in the Leadership for Change Master's program at Tampere University and come from different tracks of business, governance, and politics. So our goal for these Leadership for Change lectures is to hear from skillful leaders with experience in dealing with change who can help us to explore what kind of knowledge and expertise is needed to explain and understand complex phenomena, become a visionary leader, and to change the world. We're glad to host this event with our guest speaker, Anne Larilahti, who is the VP of Sustainability at Finnair. She contributes to the company's goal of cutting in half their 2019 level of net emissions by the end of 2025 and being carbon neutral at the latest by 2045. She also has a strong experience of working with business sustainability, as she has worked as a VP of Sustainability at Telia and as Head of Sustainability at Nokia Networks as well. Anne is also an alumna of Tampere University. So we are excited to hear from Anne and discuss with her on topics such as her career story, what sustainability looks like at Finnair, what challenges come with initiating sustainability, how Finnair has managed during the COVID-19 situation, and more. And after Anne's presentation, we'll have a discussion time with her. We're looking forward to hearing your questions. So please think of your questions you have for Anne. And we'll be looking over these questions and selecting some to ask to her. And we'll be using Zoom's Q&A tool instead of the chat for questions. So you can post your questions with the Q&A tool, as you can see, and you can do so anonymously if you like. You can also upvote and comment on others' questions. And so keep an eye on this Q&A box, and maybe you can get ideas from others' questions and upvote any questions you would like to see answered. We'll be recording the lecture and later on hopefully posting it to our Leadership for Change blog. All right, so thank you, Anne, for being here today, and please take it away. Sorry, I think your mic is not on, Anne.
Yes, better now. Good. Thank you, Daniel. This is exciting. I was really looking forward to actually being in Tampere when we first started discussing this opportunity, just to visit my old university. But here we go. Things need to be a little bit different now. But I hope we're going to have a lively discussion, nevertheless. Like Daniel said, I'm gonna be talking about sustainability, sort of few words about how I see sustainability, then to make it a bit more pragmatic, practical, talk about what we do at Finnair, and then finally talk a little bit about the pandemic and what happens when such crisis hits. What are the learnings actually you can get from a situation like we have at the moment. In terms of introduction, Daniel said and requested earlier to talk a little bit about my career story as well. So I thought that let's get that out of the way first. So yes, I studied in Tampere. I studied marketing. I studied economics. Somebody asked me quite recently that, weren't you interested in sustainability then? Why didn't you study that? But that was quite a long time ago, so there was no way to study sustainability really as a topic. There were some classes, yes, that were close to it, and obviously people were already paying attention to sustainability. But in terms of really focusing on it in my studies, that wasn't really a possibility. I was always really interested in sort of environmental matters. It was very, very important for me, as well as sort of social justice and so on. But then I also was interested in business, and I just didn't see a way to put these two together. So then I decided that, okay, I'm gonna take the business track and see if that is something that makes me happy. And it did. I did quite a few years working on marketing, working on business development, working on strategy, and then when I was working with Nokia, and we were really concentrating on the markets in Africa and Southeast Asia, and I traveled quite a bit in those countries. And then one day I just really realized that what we're doing here, that is really creating social change. I saw a lot of sort of people that were maybe surprised by the fact that no matter how much foreign aid you pour into a company, the result is not always one-on-one. There's a lot of sort of idle in there that takes a lot of energy, takes a lot of money, and doesn't always take things forward. Whereas bringing business into the country typically starts off this snowball process of creating wealth, creating jobs, and so on. So as a very, very sort of simple example of this, one thing that we saw in a small village at Nokia times was there was this guy who was a painter, so not an artist painter, but painted houses. So the way that he solicited for business was that he was hanging out outside of a paint store. So whenever he saw somebody going in to buy paints or coming out with cans of paint, he went and talked to them and said that, hey, I can do that for you, hire me. And he had a good business going, but his business was that while he was painting a house, nobody was soliciting for business. And the simple thing, when there was finally mobile coverage in the village and he had the cheapest possible mobile phone, he could make a little sign that gave his phone number, put it on the wall of the paint shop, and now he could be out painting, and still he had his little advertising on the shop that if you need something painted, please call me. And he was telling the story how it completely changed his life and his business, and he was having more work than he could hope for. And then I'm sitting there and thinking that this is something that changes people's lives. If I go back home and if I start selling the next mobile phone and the next mobile phone and the new features and trying to tell people the story how this is so important, I didn't believe in it. But I saw here that, okay, now when this person buys this phone, it actually makes a change. And then they came back, and Nokia being a big company at that point, well, still they are a big company. It is also a very sort of forward-looking company. It's a very brave company, and it gives a lot of opportunities for people. So I came back from Kenya. I walked to my boss and I said that, you know, I want to do now something different, and this is where I want to work in. And they were like, yeah, okay, well, if that's what you want, that's what you need to try. So then I started working on first a lot on sort of bringing affordable communications to people, impact, sort of that social impact type of work, impact innovation. Then I sort of slipped on the environmental side because we were often building mobile networks outside of the electricity grid, so they had to be somehow powered. And instead of running trucks around the country bringing diesel to the sites, we started working with solar power and wind power, and that was another thing that was just hugely exciting for me. So then I worked on that, and it just sort of broadened. The portfolio broadened, and I feel almost like I grew up with it at the same time as sustainability as a discipline within companies grew up. So I learned new things and sort of grew the role that way. So after Nokia, then I did a big change for family reasons. I wanted to travel less. So then I moved to different industry, and I worked at the Finnish Ski Area Association as the managing director of that. So basically, it is an organization for all the Finnish ski areas and ski schools. And then when I was starting to get ready to step into that role, I was of course doing a lot of research on the industry, and I was doing research on the member companies. And then we're like, okay, nobody's talking about sustainability. This is fantastic. I'm going to go in and I'm going to teach them all about sustainability. And then when I went in, it took me very little time to realize that these guys are doing it exactly right. They are not talking about sustainability, but they're doing all the right things because it is so embedded in their strategy. I mean, if you think about a ski resort up north, it is typically a big employer in a small village. So you have sort of inherent need to take care of your employees. You see them every day anyway, because you all live in the same village. It is extremely important for you that the village is thriving. So you want to employ people, you want to pay fair wages and so on. And then what you sell is the clean nature and the white snow. So obviously you're worried about climate change. Obviously you're working to do anything you can to fight it. So it was really nice, because before we had talked about, the corporations were always talking about, yeah, we need to integrate it, and sustainability is working to make itself redundant, and it just needs to be at the heart of strategy. But it was more talk at that point. And then when I worked with these ski resorts, I was like, okay, these guys get it. They're doing it. They're not talking about it at all, but they're doing it. So that was a good learning for me as well. After that, I moved to Telia company in Sweden, and worked as head of sustainability there. Very sort of different again from the previous. I'll touch on some of the learnings from there a little bit later, and then moved to Finnair a year and a half ago, and I can tell you that was a weird time to join aviation. So the first 6 months after I joined, I ran like a mad horse, trying to pull the sustainability strategy together and our climate targets together. And then we published them on March 5th. And you know very well what happened in March. So, we celebrated for 2 days, and after that, it was just about the pandemic, and nobody was interested. And I was scared that all the work that we've done would go to waste. Luckily not, but we did have that discussion. That can we still hold on to our targets, even though we're losing 2 million euros a day? And we made a value-based decision that, yes, we will. That's the kind of company we are. We're still gonna be just as sustainable as we were before. We're gonna thrive just ambitiously as we did before. And then, not that we're such, good people and all holy, but we also see very clearly that this is something that is going to be a competitive advantage for us. So that's another key driver why we keep on doing it, even though times are beyond tough at the moment. So that's about me. So I'm not in Tampere. I feel bad about it, but I have to show you this. So I'm a few 100 kilometers north from where you guys are. I will show you if I know how, if I can change the slide. Here we go. So I just flew to Kittilä yesterday on a very, very special flight that I will talk to you about a little later. So first about sustainability then. So everybody sort of understands it differently, and there's no right answer anyway. But often when you go to a sustainability conference and you have a panel discussion, there's always somebody who raises their hand and say that, so how should we define sustainability? And nobody has an answer to that. There is no really right or wrong answers to that. And personally, I don't really care anymore. I used a lot of time trying to define it in different ways as well, but there was always a better definition or somebody challenging the definition, or I just figured that, okay, action is maybe more important. But as a picture, this is sort of where it lies. And every company needs to make their decision that where do they want to be on this map of stakeholder expectations and the fit for strategy. It depends on your company, it depends on the corporate culture, it very much depends on the industry. And it can be a mix of, so these boxes are not mutually exclusive in any way. So violations, that's fairly clear, right? It is corruption, forced labor, human rights violations, and so on. That's something that it's very clear. Do not do that. But I put this gray area thing here, and now when I'm looking at it, I should have probably made it broader as well. But even the violations are gray area, because different countries have different legislation. And as an international company, you have to make these sort of gray area decisions that, are we going to be in compliance of this law or this international treaty, or how do we frame this? And typically you take sort of the toughest law and you apply it across the countries, but it's not an easy decision always. So even though it's sort of like, okay, don't break the law, that's very, very clear, but the law is not always clear. So there's a lot of work to be done there as well. Then compliance is almost like the opposite of violations. It's like sort of voluntarily complying with the strictest possible laws, or with international treaties, or with your internal commitments. Once you make a commitment, then the work to reach that is really not sustainability, then it's compliance. When you make your decisions, that is about sustainability, and then you just have to execute on them. Responsible business I see as being less bad, if you really simplify it. Meaning, if you think of Finnair, for example, our emissions are the part where it kind of lies in this responsible business box. So we need to reduce the emissions of our flying, being less bad there. Even this is not always clear cut. When I entered Telia was in the middle of a very, very serious reputational crisis. It was blamed for corruption in Uzbekistan. There were quite extensive investigations going on. People were sort of shying away from Telia. One of the first people that I met there, who was a long-time Telia worker, said that when people ask him where he works, he says in telecommunications. He didn't want to tell that he worked for Telia. The reputation was so bad. The company hadn't broken any laws, but they had broken their own code of conduct and sort of their own ethical considerations. But then we made the decision that, okay, now a responsible thing to do is to leave all these Eurasian countries, because we see that we have done something wrong there. We find it very hard for us to run an ethical business there, because when you enter in a wrong way, it's very difficult to become something else. So we figured that, okay, the most responsible thing to do is to divest. And we divested the business in Eurasia, and then the response was 50-50. Some of the people were like, yes, okay, this is a responsible thing to do. You focus on the Nordic and the Baltics, and you leave the countries where you can't do ethical business. And then 50% were like, that's like the most irresponsible thing you can do. You should stay there, and you should impact the country culture. You should impact the society there through doing responsible business there. So yeah, which one is right? I do not know. But at that point, we decided that for us, for our company, it was the right decision was to leave. So again, even that is a gray area, being less bad. But what is bad? Shared value creation. I'm sure that is very familiar to you as a concept. So, you know, make money while doing good. And this is of course fantastic. And there's increasing demand for products and services in this area. Anything from food stuff to textiles, to experiences, and so on. And it's a fantastic idea. And when you look at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, for example, those are fantastic business opportunities for companies. So there's a lot that you can do. So if I go back to Telia or any telecommunications company, really, their sustainability value is really in shared value creation. They can dematerialize things. So, you know, maybe some people are not very happy about it, but there you go. People listen to the music on Spotify. They don't buy records or cassette tapes or anything like that. That used to be a huge industry with a lot of plastic, with a lot of logistics, a lot of waste. That is practically eliminated by Spotify and similar services. Also, people travel less because you can work remotely. And again, some people are not happy about that, but there you go. It is really, from a telecoms operator perspective, the more you sell, the better it is for the climate, to simplify it grossly. But I think there's a huge and growing market for different shared value creation solutions. And then finally, sort of this, everybody always wants to be on the top right corner. It's sort of the advocacy corner. Very few companies are really there. It is a risky strategy to be an advocate. It gets political real quick. And that's a risky area for a company to be. But then, you know, strategy is always a risk. So sometimes it is a risk worth taking. I think in a very small way, we're sort of we're inching into that by sort of pushing the whole industry by sort of outdoing the industry targets, for example, hoping that others will be inspired as well, but very, very little at Finnair at the moment. The big names there are, of course, Patagonia. I think in Finland, Finlayson is the one that is mostly flirting with that corner. And yeah, you can be in many boxes, but typically you can't be on the higher boxes if you haven't done your work in the lower ones. Advocate for world peace and gender equality and rights of the child. If you're selling drugs at the schoolyard, it just doesn't work. Or you can have a beautiful shared value creation offering, but then in your value chain you have forced labor or you have bad working conditions for people. It doesn't work that way. You always have to sort of build from the ground up, and then you leave the operations to some of the lower boxes while you move also higher. And that's the way you work. And you don't always have to get to the top right. It's not necessary for everybody. And you look at companies like well, let's take alcohol, for example. Very difficult to find the shared value creation there. Or tobacco, even better. There isn't really a shared value creation case for tobacco. Everybody sort of agrees that, yeah, it's bad. It's bad for people. It's bad for people's health. It destroys the environment. It doesn't have an upside. Even easier to find the upside for alcohol than tobacco. Of course, some people enjoy tobacco, but there are people that enjoy gambling, and there are people that enjoy, various different things. And that means that those companies will continue to exist. And it's just as important that there are strong sustainability strategies in these companies as well. There's no value in moving, well, there's value, but the value of moving up on this chart is not as big as the value of being as good as possible, to being genius in your box. So if you are a tobacco company, yeah, they should not be selling what they sell, but hey, let's be grown-ups, they will. It's not going to disappear overnight. So it's important that also those businesses, the harm is as little as possible. And actually there's a lot of movement now in tobacco companies actually sort of getting this, putting a lot of effort into what they do, making it as sustainable as possible, and then at the same time, little by little, trying to find the new business models to move away from the harmful business. So if you're thinking about career in sustainability, I think you can do great in doing difficult things in challenging companies, or you can do great in doing sort of trailblazing thing in good companies. Both as exciting and important. Personally, I like working for challenging companies. I think it's really, really rewarding. So here, this is a wonderful framework. You all know this. It has brought companies and other stakeholders a common terminology and something that everybody understands and sort of can get behind common targets. The important thing is here, I think, is the balance. We need to understand the difficulty of the balance. So it's great that if you work on number 2, you reduce hunger, you're probably going to also have an impact on good health and well-being. So they're related. But then again, you work on 1, reduce poverty, and you're probably gonna make it more difficult for number 13, climate action. The more money people have, more they consume, worse for the climate. So it's not an easy thing to always find that balance, and it often falls to companies as well to find that balance. We don't have that sort of luxury of being a one topic NGO, for example. And don't get me wrong, I think it's great that there are NGOs that only focus on one topic, because then they can really, really dig deep, and there's great expertise and understanding being created there, and they can really focus on pushing that forward. But then, as a company, you have to balance. So if you think of Finnair, for example, climate action, fantastic. We were super last year, because we flew like 10% of what we normally fly. So our emissions were smaller than in 50 years or more. But the social and economic cost of that is just not acceptable. We have thousands of people that are furloughed, that are struggling financially because of that. We have people that in the destination countries that are even worse off, with the whole sort of situation of tourism practically disappearing overnight. And tourism is an industry that typically employs a lot of women, employs a lot of lower level educated people, and they're out of jobs. And it's not so easy to just find new ones. So yes, did great on emissions. The impact doesn't really show yet, but the fact is that the emissions were lower. But what was the cost? So we need to make sure that we always find that balance and really understand where we are aiming at. So when you do strategy, so now moving on to Finnair more. So when you do strategy, of course, then you can't do everything. So we were looking at the SDG map, and we were trying to find our company in there. And these are the 6 SDGs that we found. So number 13, climate action, no-brainer. That is what our stakeholders expect from us, especially investors, our owners, Finnish state being the biggest one. But then, interestingly, on the environmental side, then our customers see sort of a circular economy, recycling as more important than climate change. So when we survey them, that is their biggest worry, because we when you're sitting on your airplane seat and you get your food in front of you, and maybe there is a plastic cup, and that is something that really, really annoys people. Or they see that maybe things are not properly recycled, or they think they're not properly recycled. So that is something that is very close to our customers' hearts, and probably feels more sort of understandable than the megatons and sort of the whole CO2 complex frameworks around that. So we're working on both, and both are challenging, but by far, of course, climate is the key for us. Then on the second slide, more on the social side. So again, number 16, that is our reason of being, and that is the social good that flying and traveling does. It is global trade, it is global diplomacy, it is tourism, it is people meeting new people, getting to understand new cultures, and and getting to understand that even though something might look very different, it might feel very different, the people are still very, very similar. I mean, we sometimes laugh at certain countries that, you know, when people don't even have passports, no wonder they vote like they do. Well, if we can't travel, then here we go. Then we're exactly the same. So we need to we need that interaction with the world. And aviation is a very, very efficient way of doing that, but we just need to do it in the way that doesn't harm the environment. Gender equality, we're pretty okay, but we're not perfect. So we want to be a lot better still. So focusing quite a bit of that on that as well. And then on the lower level, it's almost like the how to the challenges above. And we see that there needs to be an increased focus on innovation and an increased focus on partnerships if we wish to really deliver on our promises. And then when you look at our strategy, the whole strategy is called Sustainable Profitable Growth. So sustainability is really, really in the heart of what we do. And I'll show you a bit more on that. So we're looking at sustainability and our culture as sort of the foundation of then delivering on the more operational parts of our business. And what I really, really like to see, and we're not ready here yet, so this is a little bit of it's part reality, part dream. So this one elegant line throughout the company where everybody sort of understands what is being done and can contribute to it. And often you hear that the most important thing in creating any sustainability program is to have a strong tone from the top. And we talked about that a lot, and we were very happy because we had a super vocal CEO that is very dedicated to sustainability. The chairman of the board as well. He has been a fantastic support on our journey and when we were making our strategy. And this, by the way, is a big change that has happened during my career. So now I sit here and say, like, yeah, the chairman of the board is a fantastic support. When I started, the chairman of the board would not open his door if I wanted to talk to him, for sure, because nobody really understands that. What are these girls doing? And it was girls. It was always girls, and we were called girls. There you go. But this is sort of the sustainability journey as well. Before we were sort of like doing something, tree huggy, and now it's really at the heart of the strategy. And so when we were looking at the tone from the top, and we also discussed the fact that, we want this to be in our DNA. And a lot of companies say that, yes, sustainability is in our DNA. And I've said it several times. I've sat on several panels and said for different companies that, yes, the sustainability is in the DNA. But then we started thinking that, so what does that actually mean? What is DNA? And then we realized that the tone from the top and the DNA, that is actually the articles of association of the company. That is the rule that you live by. So if you really want to put it at the core of the organization, that's where you need to put it. And we did that last May. And I'm happy to say that we were almost the first. I found one company that actually did it first in Finland, a small investment company. But we were a first big company in Finland to change its articles of association to include sustainability as well. So in addition to our purpose, as stated in articles of association, not as stated in corporate slides, it used to be, flying people and goods from airport to airport, leasing, owning, selling airplanes and so on. But now it also says that we can engage in other types of activities that increase our positive role and reduce our negative role in the society and to the environment. So it's there. The owners have said it. This is what we expect from you. Then the next step is the board. And the board, of course, is there for approval and guidance on the sustainability strategy, on the corporate strategy. Then you have the management team that has the ownership of everything. So we don't have a separate separate sort of steering team or a subcommittee or whatever on sustainability, but it is part of the executive team agenda. Then we do have a sustainability leadership team, which is a collection of people around the company, so that we're trying to cover all the key operations in the company, and use that leadership team to really roll out the strategy. Then it is about the processes, so that not every time do you have to rely on, will I remember to think about sustainability when I make this decision, but it is in the process that the process sort of gives you a checklist, almost like, okay, and the impact on the environment is this, calculate the CO2 emissions, so that it becomes automatic. And then finally, all employees need to be on it. And one of the most powerful ways of doing that is through rewarding systems. So at Finnair, we have 2 sustainability targets. We have, in our incentives, we have altogether 5 targets for everybody, from management to every employee. And we have 3 financial targets, and then we have 2 sustainability targets, one on emissions and one on employee safety. And that starts steering. That's part of the automation as well. Then it's on everybody's agenda, because it is in your targets, your bonus depends on it. I'm just going to jump over that. We work on wide variety of sustainability issues, absolutely. We were arrogant enough when we were doing the sustainability strategy to decide that, yeah, we're going to be great at everything. And I sort of stand behind that still, because due to our strong history, due to the fact that we are based in the Nordics, that we have strong government ownership, we are already a very sustainable company, and we're doing a lot of things right, but we still have to actively work on it so that we stay on that. It's always a moving target. So we've sort of decided, these are examples only, but we've decided that in any given aspect of sustainability, we always want to be in the top quartile of airlines. No exception. Everything needs to be on the top quartile. And then we're going to build a little bit of competitive advantage on one thing, and that's going to be climate. And that's also, like I said, that's the biggest sort of expectation from the stakeholders, apart from customers. So I don't know if we can, well, if this works, but I was going to ask you a question on the climate impact. That what do you think is the percentage of CO2 emissions, global CO2 emissions, that is caused by airlines? I don't know if you can put any answers to Q&A or chat, maybe not. I'm not sure, Daniel, how this works.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
yeah, I see Joni's answering
for it, but
yeah, okay.
Well, maybe we'll get a few answers in the
yeah,
Q&A.
You guys are too good. 2% was guessed, and 2% is exactly right. Typically, when I ask this question, I get anything from 5 to 20. So you're much more informed than most audiences that I talk to. So yeah, it's 2%, but that's only CO2. There are other emissions as well, and the impact of those we understand a little bit less at the moment. But we're hoping that as the science progresses, we will get a handle of that as well, and can start working on those. But it is 2% is small if you compare it to the coverage that we're getting in the media, for example. If there's an article on global warming, there's a picture of a plane there, always. Not always, but you know. So we get a lot of coverage. We're like the poster child of climate change. So in that way, 2% is small, but in absolute terms, it's still huge. It is a huge amount of CO2 that we need to improve. So the industry as a whole has decided that it will cut its emissions by half by 2050. And I would imagine that they're going to tighten that up a little bit, I hope. And the reason why I think they're going to tighten it up is that the companies, individual companies, are doing much more ambitious work. So Finnair has decided that we're going to be carbon neutral at the latest by 2045, and we're going to do the first 50% by 2025. And the reason why we do it in a kind of a funny way, that it takes us 5 years to do 50% and then 20 years to do the rest, is that we wanted to have a really strong crash start for two reasons. First of all, need to do it, need to act fast, just from the environmental perspective. And the second was that you can't get people engaged around 2045. Then it says like, yeah, I'm not going to be in this company anymore, I'm going to be retired. And then it becomes like, yeah, tomorrow, next year. But 25 is like, it's here and we need to get busy. And that has been really good. We talk internally, we talk much more about 25 than we talk about 45. And that's all inspirational and great, but that doesn't really take us anywhere yet. Then you have to really break it down so that people can sort of find themselves in that inspirational ambition. And this is mostly what we do. So the biggest CO2 emission for us is clearly the emissions from flying. And it's very simple math. It is how many kilometers do we fly, how much energy times how much energy we use, times the CO2 content of that energy minus compensation. And we work on all of these. And these are examples. There's, especially in the energy box, there is probably like 100 different initiatives at the moment that we work on. And like I said, I came on a special flight here yesterday. So we did sort of a demo flight where we really looked at this formula and tried to do everything perfect. So we were looking at, we were working together with air traffic, or Fintraffic, which is the company that sort of controls the airspace. So we were working with them to make sure that we can fly as straight as possible from Helsinki to Kittilä, and we did. We came like a bullet. On energy, we did everything that we could to reduce weight. We put a little bit less water in the tanks. We loaded a little less extra drinks. We did a lot of different things that I don't understand half of in the cockpit during the flights. So about a dozen different things happened in the cockpit during the flight. We used biofuel. So we reduced the emissions by 35% by using the biofuel, and then the rest we compensated. So in that way, it was a net zero flight. And we wanted to do this to sort of create ourselves a benchmark that this is what it could look like. And yeah, I mentioned weight. We're completely obsessed with weight. We talk about it constantly. We have a Weight Watchers team in the company that is just looking at everything from the weight of a spoon to the paint that the airplane is painted with, to the carpets. Everything is measured in weight, because every single kilo that we carry is fuel. And then with the volumes, it gets big. So in 2045, this is how we sort of see it. I put big work in progress here because we're constantly recalculating that. But the new aviation fuels, biofuels, electrofuels are going to be, and electric flying eventually are going to be key. But then still compensations and other market measures will play an important role. I've been talking too long, but this is really important. You shouldn't look at, so when we're thinking about this, climate is not a Finnair issue, right? It's not even a Finland issue. It is a global issue. So it's very important that you look at it globally as well. So let's say that if we flew using maximum biofuel all the time, we would reduce our emissions. That would be great. Also, biofuel is 3 to 5 times more expensive than fossil fuels, which would mean that we would need to raise our prices so high that we would lose business. We would lose, I mean, this is hypothetical. We would die in 2 weeks if we used all biofuel on these prices, but even if we used like 10% of biofuel. So we would lose business. 50% of our business is traffic between Asia and Europe. So if Finnair gets expensive, does that mean that then people don't travel and goods don't move between Europe and Asia anymore? It does not. It just moves to a different route. So then what we did was that we reduced Finnair emissions, we reduced Finland emissions, while pushing those emissions to other parties and actually raising emissions totally. So Frankfurt, Hong Kong, for example, going through Finland is 25% less emissions than going via Doha. That is on the map. So it's important to keep that big picture in mind and make sure that when you have companies that can perform in a sustainable, responsible way, can create shared value. This, I would say, is a shared value. The more we can push traffic on this short, most efficient route, the better it is for the environment. Because the globe is a ball. So surprisingly, the shortest route goes through Helsinki. Yeah, so this is important to take into consideration as well. That do not optimize your own part only and push emissions to somebody else. So finally, then, just trying to hurry a bit, just to think on your own, if you want to have an impact on this as well. The biggest thing that you can do is to choose the right airline, choose the right route. First of all, think if you need to travel. Not all flights are necessary. Many flights are necessary for a variety of reasons, but not all of them. And then when you fly, choose who you fly with, what route do you take, and then pack light. That has a huge meaning. And also pre-order. People don't really think about that, but when you don't pre-order your meal, then we have to guess what you're gonna take, and we need to take sort of options. So we fly a lot of food that nobody eats, that we need to burn at the end of the flight, because you can't put it in a compost when it crosses EU borders, for example. But if you pre-order, then we have just this one tray for you. So you can impact by your choices as well. So finally, very quickly about the pandemic, kind of came as a surprise. WEF didn't see it as very likely in January 2020 because there were bigger things. There were biodiversity, extreme weather that we were looking at very carefully as well, or are looking at very carefully as well. And then of course, climate change. This was my favorite picture of 2020, the Blade Runner 2049 and San Francisco 2020. So the pandemic was not expected because we were focusing on these other things. Interestingly, when it hit, we were still focusing on the other things. Typically, people have like one thought of one crisis in their mind, or humanity has one crisis at the time. So it can be climate, it can be the financial crisis, it can be the migration crisis. But surprisingly, when the pandemic hit, climate didn't go away. I'm afraid it is because it's gone too far, and that's the reason. But nevertheless, I'm very, very happy that there's very sort of strong action around it, and everything is about building back better. And when we come out of this pandemic, we've learned a few things. We can do things differently. We need to be more ambitious in our work, and we've shown that we can actually work together, and we can act fast. Some learnings that we had and I had from during the COVID and post-COVID. First of all, strike a balance. Like I said, even more than ever, you have to think about all aspects of sustainability, environmental, but also the social and economic sustainability. Be a partner. So big problems, big solutions. You need to be able to partner with your competition across industries, with the NGOs, with politicians, because that's the only way that you can really create innovation. And you need to go into these partnerships with really an open heart, because there's no innovation and there's no collaboration without trust. So we really need to start trusting ourselves, and not to always see competition as, you know, taking something away from you. Sometimes it can be about, you know, bake a bigger cake rather than fight for the slices. Do something together. NGOs, like I said, I mean, they're fantastic, and there's a lot of knowledge. Let's listen to them. They're not there to make our life worse. They're trying to improve everybody's lives. And sometimes it's not easy to understand because we come from different perspectives, but, you know, they're not all sort of militant activists, and we're not the corporate devils either. So let's try to sort of meet each other on a level where we can actually create some trust, and in that way find new solutions. And then finally, seize the moment. I mean, it's said that never let a good crisis go to waste, and I think that's very, very important. We've learned a few things during this pandemic that we otherwise wouldn't have. I mean, we're selling business class meals in supermarkets. We brought the blueberry juice to the supermarkets. We flew virtual flights to Lapland with Santa over Christmas. We have planes where we've taken the seats out and we're carrying cargo up top when people don't travel, but still things need to travel. So it's really sparked this innovation and really this can-do attitude that, okay, we need to find ways that we make a little bit of money so that we can know if we sell this business class food here, we can still keep these 2 cooks employed. And there's this fantastic sort of sense of, innovating together in the company. And that has been brought by this crisis, not despite of it. So there's an upside. Another thing that sort of seizing the moment that has been kind of interesting is that now we can do certain things that we couldn't otherwise, like the flight that I mentioned yesterday. It would have been very, very difficult to do if we had the normal traffic, because now we could do things manually. We could sort of do things a little bit different at the airport, for example. The sky was clear, there wasn't anybody else there, so we can now test some things that otherwise would be a little bit difficult to test and pilot. So that has been really, really important. And then finally, in many industries, certainly for aviation, but I think many others as well, restaurants, retail, e-commerce, heavy industries, there are changes coming. When we are out of this pandemic, the world is not going to be the same. So you should use this moment to make sure that your company sees the trends, understands what's happening, and takes those elements, sustainability for sure being one of those, and build a company that when we're back on track is strong and is ready to take on the competition and be competitive in the new world, and with the new expectations from the stakeholders. So we've had a reset, so it's a perfect time to build back better. And with that, I will thank you, and I'll turn it back to Daniel.
Okay, thank you very much, Anne. It's very interesting and encouraging to hear the steps Finnair is taking towards sustainability. So now we'll move to our discussion time. Excited for that. So everyone, you can put your questions in the Q&A box that you have for Anne. See, there's already a few. That's great. Now I'll pass it off to Vilma, Isabel, and Susanna for the Q&A.
Yes, thank you, Anne, for your insightful presentation. My name is Susanna, and I will now continue with the Q&A part of this session. So our first question is, what have been some of the most important projects that Finnair has implemented for sustainability?
The most important project for sure was just the target setting. It was a very, very sort of detailed and a hard workload, but to me it's really difficult to engage others on any kind of journey on working on sustainability on any level, unless it's very clear to everybody that what are we aiming to do, what is our common goal, and then sort of the solutions to reach that goal. There can be 10 or 100 or 1,000 different ways to reach the goal, but it's important that you really take the time in the beginning to make sure that there is a goal that is inspirational. It is achievable, but it needs to be difficult. It needs to be a little bit like, yeah, if we get this, we're going to be the best in the world, because nobody wants to be sort of pretty good. It's very hard to inspire people to be sort of sustainable. You have to sort of put yourself out there and do your math and do your research. That can you really also get there? But then push to be as ambitious as possible, because then things will start to sort of fall in place. So that, I would say, is probably the most important thing that we did. Second thing that I would mention is this articles of association, because it's there. It's not getting out of there. It is a very strong tone from the top, and it is something that will be with us. I mean, we're going to be 100 years old in 23, so we're building now the next 100 years, and the Articles of Association change is part of that.
Yes, thank you very much for your answer, Anne. And now my colleague Isabel will continue with the next question.
Hello, Anne. So one of the questions that we have is it challenging to get partnerships for sustainable collaboration initiative?
No, not today. Everybody, all the big companies especially, they have their goals, and once you sort of find the ones that have similar goals, it's quite easy to find partners. Like the flight yesterday, it was done in collaboration with Fintraffic, but because it was covered in the biggest newspapers and so on, we already have several different companies approaching us and saying like, hey, we could sort of contribute to that as well. The Finnish Meteorological Institute is saying like, yeah, but weather data, maybe we could part of this as well. I mean, we work with them already, but everybody's like ready to get closer and see that what can we do, how can we share data more efficiently and so on. So I would say, yeah, it's easy nowadays because everybody is sort of getting on the same track. It's just you have to make sure that then something real comes out as well, and not just discussions.
Thank you so much for your answer. It's really encouraging to know that people is able to collaborate, and that in today's world, people is able to see sustainability as a really important subject. Now I'll pass you to my colleague.
Yes, so our next question is, what are the main steps that Finnair is taking to preserve its sustainability goals during and after the COVID pandemic?
Yeah, we're doing what we did. So like I said in the beginning, we had the discussion that can we stick to this plan, and we came into a conclusion that yes, we have to stick to this plan. Obviously, there are some changes that are due to the fact that we're sort of shoveling 2 million euros every day out of the window, if you will. So we're making 2 million euro losses almost every day. So that of course has an impact. We only have 20 to 25% of people working with us. The rest are furloughed or had to leave the company already. So that has impact on the timelines. But overall, we haven't changed the targets, so we're moving forward as before.
Yes.
I'm listening to you, but while you speak, I'm gonna get my charger. Otherwise, my computer is gonna die. But go ahead.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, so thank you for the answer, and I'll hand it over to Isabel again.
Yes, okay. So the next question is, how do you think air travel will change after we come out of the pandemic?
Yeah, that's a super interesting question. I don't think anybody really knows. Starting from the discussion that is flying going to be more or less expensive. There are certain people that think that it's going to be less expensive because there's overcapacity on the market. The competition is going to be brutal. It always was, but now even more. There are certain people that think that it's going to be more expensive because there's going to be new restrictions and so on, and then of course sustainability demands make it more expensive for airlines to offer this service. So that's one thing that we're sort of looking at. Some changes, I'm sure some of the learnings that we have from during the pandemic are going to stay there, like remote working, for example. So I think companies were already looking at their business travel very carefully, and this has made them do more so. So business travel likely is going to take longer to recover. We see that there's sort of this pent-up demand then for leisure travel. People are really hoping that they could travel again, so that might recover faster. But then that is then depending on the pricing, of course. Personally, I think one trend is here to stay, and that's going to be people sort of combining maybe work and leisure. So maybe you go to the Pyrenees for 3 months to work remotely and engage in your hobby or whatever, and that is both your work trip and your leisure travel for the year. So it might be that people are going to travel fewer times, but then on longer periods. Like now when I'm up here north, this is full of people that are here to work. So they're not going to fly to Lapland every second week, but they came here after Christmas and they're still here. So that's going to be something that I believe in, that it's going to be less trips, but they're going to be longer trips, and there's going to be a lot of this combining of remote work and sort of travel in terms of sort of experiencing new cultures and really getting sort of embedding yourself in a new environment, which was a travel trend anyway. People were not so interested in seeing the Eiffel Tower. I saw a research where people were asked that what would be the best experience on your travels, and most mentions were to being invited to somebody's home for dinner. So that's what people are looking for, and it's a great way to work in a different country. Then you actually get to know people and so on. And we've learned this remote work now. Some people like it. I personally, I'm not a remote person, but a lot of people are better at it.
Yeah, it seems like a great opportunity also for Finnair to explore new possibilities, as you just said.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now my colleague will ask you another question.
Yes. So our next question is, as young professionals, what tips would you give us for implementing sustainable positioning in our employers?
Yeah, make friends with the CFO office. That's number one. Make sure that you have somebody on the finance side. Work with people in strategy. Work with people in HR, employee engagement, and in technology, depending on the sector. So that is the best way to sort of forward the sustainability agenda. Is talk to everybody. Make sure that everybody understands what you're trying to do, and you understand what they're trying to do. Have this dialogue to really push it into what they do every day, and they want to do it every day. So just collaboration is key. And I would start with the CFO office. That's a good place to start.
Yes, thank you so much for the tips. I'm sure those will come in handy in the future. And now we'll pass it on once more to Isabel, and she will ask the last question from our side before we pass it on to the audience.
Yes, so, okay, well, we have seen that in the chat there has been some questions. We still encourage people to make other questions while Anne and I keep up with the conversation. So, Anne, in your experience, well, you have said some already, but what has been some of the difficulties on implementing sustainability strategies?
Sort of different difficulties at different times. In the beginning, it was very much just getting your voice heard. When I said that we were called girls, I meant that literally. I've had a boss who asked me in a team meeting that when we were doing a roundtable, what has everybody been doing this week? And then he looked at me and said, "What about the expensive girl stuff?" So that was a difficulty, just to be taken seriously, that this is something that is important. But now there's no difficulty in that. Nowadays, I sometimes feel that people get super excited about it, so that the biggest challenge is almost sort of keeping everything in check and keeping this coherent. Remember this sort of elegant line throughout the company that everybody's doing the same thing and everybody's sort of running in the same direction, because everybody wants to run and everybody wants to make the world better. But make sure that you can harness that energy and that innovation to work for that one particular goal or your set of goals, whatever it is. So that, I would say, is the biggest challenge right now.
Okay, thank you. That's really encouraging also that you give us this tip to like fight for what we want and for our environment. So now we will proceed with the questions in the Q&A. So I will pass the floor to Wilma.
And thank you, Anne, for your comprehensive presentation. So I will go through a few questions from the Q&A, but I also want to let the audience know that if they want, they can use the raise hand sign and ask the questions themselves. So the first one is from Joni. So do you want to name the most important stakeholders or institutional pressures that are behind the emission targets? And what is the role of financial institutions and reduction targets on the transition risk in their portfolios?
To the last question, the role is huge. Financial institutions have sort of woken up the past couple of years. I think it was maybe 4 years ago when the BlackRock CEO wrote his letter to the CEOs, and he had like completely changed his tone. Sorry, and he started talking about sustainability. So that was some kind of a turning point for financial industry. But it took a couple of more years to really trickle down. And the past couple of years, the financial sector has really woken up, and that is going to make a huge difference, because the demands from them in terms of how we report, what we report, how do we do our sort of risk mitigation, risk planning, what kind of scenarios do we have? So the demands are I would even say that it's some of them are even confusing. There are so many frameworks out there that we should be replying to, and ratings and all this, but overall the role of financial institutions is huge. They're putting a lot of pressure on companies now, and that's great. Our biggest owner is the Finnish state, so obviously that is a super important stakeholder for us, and Minister Tuppurainen has publicly stated that she also has the expectation that Finnair will stick to their targets also during and after the pandemic. So there you go. The biggest owner says you have to do it, so no need to discuss. So I hope that answered the question. So the stakeholders, financial stakeholders, super important.
Pretty well. So the next question is, many people, including some politicians, for example, Sweden, applied an airport tax, and activities are framing aviation as a major contributor to climate change. How can and does Finnair combat this discourse?
with data. We're trying to collect as much data and really understand and share that data as much as possible. It's not always, this is a topic that for some people is very emotional topic, and it's very hard to have a discussion with emotions on one side and data on the other. So it doesn't always work, but that's how we try to handle the discourse. We just try to understand better and better and engage with research institutions and so on, just to make sure that we know what we're talking about, and also we share our data very openly. We, on the flight yesterday, if you want to take a look at it, I tweeted during the flight, and we were really, we were telling what we were doing. We showed that this is how much fuel we're going to put in the plane, and this is, this is sort of the impact of it. So yeah, it doesn't always work, but I think that is the best way. It's just yeah, keep to the facts, keep to the data, be as open as possible.
Thank you. And now it's the time for the audience. If they want, they can raise their hands and ask the questions by themselves. But if not, I will continue with the questions from the Q&A. So if you want to raise your hand, now is the time to do that. Okay, so let's continue with the questions from the Q&A. There is a very long one. So Joseph is asking, why is there such a disparity between the media coverage of airlines seemingly being one of the biggest polluters than actual reality? Obviously more can be done in the airline industry, and it is, but it seems the biggest contributors are the dynasties behind the airline industry. How can we change this perception, especially since has noticed how vital the airline industry is not only to the economy, but also many other sectors, be it directly or indirectly?
Yeah, it's difficult to say, but once something starts, when somebody made us a poster child, then it's just everybody just continued. I think that's part of the discussion. Another thing is that textile industry, for example, is responsible for a lot bigger percentage of emissions than aviation is. But everybody wears clothes, but not everybody flies. Actually, very few people in the world fly, and there's most of the emissions are created by an even smaller part of that elite that flies. So there's a little bit of a political thing there as well. Also, people have a little bit of a misconception on flying. I mean, we get a lot of media where it's like, these people are just flying around the world, and but if your platinum card customers would stop flying, you would save this and this much emissions. But typically the people that fly most, they fly for work. Very few people, there's no jet set anymore as they were maybe in the 70s, but people fly for reasons, but that's not maybe always seen. And that sort of creates that fallacy that it is something very frivolous and doesn't need to be there. So that's, this is my speculation. Maybe that is why it has been lifted up so high. And again, Joseph, you are asking that how can we change this perception? I would answer again, data. We just have to get the facts out.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. Because of the time limit we have, I will next let Isabel continue with the questions so we can go through them all.
Yes, so one of the questions here asks it says that you highlight the role of partnerships to make change. And do you see Finnair doing that not only in the aviation industry, but in other industries, for example, by using some partnerships and things like this?
Yeah, absolutely. Sort of industries that are close to ours. Fuel is a fantastic example. So we partner with Neste, who is very active in not only producing biofuel but also engaging in future research. Also, we are participating in a super interesting program of power to X fuel with the Lappeenranta University of Technology, where they create fuel out of CO2 and hydrogen. And that is, it's mind-blowingly cool that you could do a sort of a zero emission fuel out of a factory chimney and byproduct from a chemicals industry. So yeah, we try to partner across industry borders. It's a little bit new for us. We're good at partnering within the industry. We have like the alliances, like the One World and so on. We're good at that, but we're more and more reaching outside to sort of really look at our total role in society.
Okay, thank you so much for your answer. One of the other questions that I find really interesting here, it says, if you are planning to help distributing the COVID vaccine?
We are ready to do that. In terms of who distributes what, there's a lot of sort of secrecy around it for obvious reasons. So I don't think you would find anywhere very clear answer to which airlines and which routes are carrying vaccines, but we are able to do that. So we have sort of the capabilities for the temperatures and so on. What we do a lot is that we transport a lot of masks, tests, and other sort of protective equipment. So that's we do a lot of that traffic from Asia to Europe at the moment.
Okay, thank you so much for your answer. I will put my camera on. So one other question that we have here is, what are the main obstacles, for example, the actors, the forces, the practices, and thinking partners in becoming more sustainable, and how to overcome them?
The main obstacle right now is Corona, but otherwise, yeah, it's more like it's not so much obstacles as it is maybe different speeds. I think most players are sort of playing to the same goal, but we might be moving at different speeds. And then in terms of sort of practices, it is, I mean, especially in older companies, you always have quite a lot of legacy. You're very sort of used to doing in one certain way, and then it might take some effort to change that sort of set way. Yeah, I think that's probably the most important sort of factor that slows progress down, is that we've always done it in a certain way. We need to make a lot of changes in terms of, or before we can make sustainability projects or practices a norm. It's just yeah, organizations tend to be a little slow, but again, like I said, the pandemic has been the silver lining on this nuclear cloud is that that it has forced us to be quicker and more innovative, and I hope that will carry after this as well.
Yes, thank you so much for your answer. It really gave us details on what are the main actors and what is happening right now. So now I will pass the questions to Wilma. She will continue with the ones that the people here in the webinar have asked.
So we have few questions left on the Q&A. So one of them is, like what challenges does Finnair face for implementing sustainability, especially for social challenges?
Most of our challenges are not really on the social side. Like I said, on social sustainability, we see that we have that shared value approach. It's something that we can contribute to. But having said that, in our strategy, as you saw, gender equality is still an issue. We're pretty okay. We're about 50-50 in the company. If you look at the company managers, again, we're 50-50. So that's pretty good. But then there are these pockets. So if you go to the airplane, it's kind of men in the front, women in the back, right? The captains are typically men, and then the cabin crew is typically women. And that's where we want to mix things up a little bit. Also, like in any company, very sort of, I guess it's a little stereotypical, but like communications is women. I've never seen a male assistant in my life, except for in TV once in a Friends episode. That's the only male assistant. So, or mechanics, there we have hardly any women. So it's we still have these pockets where we're trying to be better, and then the sort of the next step from that is that once we get like a good grasp on the gender equality, and we get really good processes in place, then we're hoping that we can use those, or sort of like extend those processes to other diversity aspects as well, be it age, nationality, whatever, so that we would have some processes ready that, for example, in recruiting, even if we create the process to sort of from the gender perspective, we could use it also for these other aspects. So equality is very much on our agenda, even though we think we're good. We're okay. We're not bad, and again, we're on the upper quartile compared to other airlines. I have to tell you this. There was I'm not going to say the name of the airline, but it was actually in a newspaper where I read a chairman of a board of an airline saying that they were looking for a new CEO, and they had asked him that could he see a woman being a CEO of his airline, and he said that that women are very capable of doing the jobs that men can do, but not really the real difficult ones like running an airline. So compared to that, we're fantastic on gender equality. But yeah, we need to improve there as well. And then, of course, now the big social challenge for us is the fact that our people are not working. We're doing everything we can to get them back to work from their furloughs, but it is a huge social challenge that how do we treat the employees that had to leave the company, and how do we treat the employees that are still with the company, but they're sitting at home waiting for that call to come back to work. So that is a huge challenge at the moment.
Yes, thank you, Anne. So we have time for a couple more questions. And the next one is, what about the concept of greenwashing? How to recognize it when working with sustainability and find out whether the desire to become sustainable is sincere, and how to move from mere talk to action?
Yeah, I think there used to be a lot more greenwashing or whitewashing or rainbow washing, and there was a lot of talk, but that has changed quite a bit. It's partly because companies are required to report on such detailed level that it would be really difficult to greenwash nowadays, I think. Because of the legal requirements, but also because people are much more active. It's not just the NGOs that are looking at us, but it is everybody, it is our customers. So if we start telling one story and then the customer experiences our service and sees another story, that greenwash lasted for half a second. So because companies are more transparent, be it because they want to be more transparent or they're forced to be more transparent, that is like the best insurance against greenwashing. Of course, it still happens, but I'm just saying that not very many companies do it because, well, it's not the right thing to do, but also if you happen to be sort of a Mr. Burns type of CEO, you probably still wouldn't do it because you know that you're going to get caught. So yeah, companies can be a little creative with their wordings and so on, but in terms of what we report, what we do, the numbers that we give out, yeah, I would pretty much trust companies to walk the talk on those. Then in terms of ambition, how real those are, that is hard to say. And that's why you need the targets, and that's why you need to communicate your goals so that people can follow up that, okay, you said that you want to be carbon neutral, fine. So what are your steps? What's your roadmap? Let me know. Okay, so 50%, 25. Okay, well, I expect you to report every year where you are on that journey, and I expect you to hit that target because you said it. So so we have a great sparring partner in the general public, as well as then the closer stakeholders.
Yes, so thank you for your answer, and we have one more question that we can still facilitate. So how do you evaluate the sustainability achievements that have been reached so far, especially during the pandemic time?
Yeah, like I said, we are sort of using two key performance indicators also as part of our incentive schemes. So we calculate something called fuel efficiency index that basically makes sure that because we know that our emissions are going to grow. When the traffic grows, the emissions are going to grow. But we need to make sure that if the traffic grows like this, then the emissions are going to grow like this, so that we will never get to the same level as we were before. So that is a KPI that we follow very, very, very closely. Another one is then long time injury frequency, and it's kind of the same way or same logic like with the fuel efficiency index, and that is to, again, when the traffic grows, when we get busier, we are not going to do that at the expense of our employees' safety. So we're going to be busier, but we're going to make sure that that sort of the safeguards and the processes are there, and that we keep sort of concentrating on the right ways to do things. So those achievements are the key ones that we measure across the board.
Okay, thank you. And we have one more question from the audience, from Jenny. Hey, Jenny, can you turn your mic on now?
Yeah, I guess it works.
Go ahead.
Does it?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can hear you.
Okay. All right. That's great. Thanks. So you mentioned the Neste collaboration earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And do you say that the relationship with Neste is sort of mutually beneficial? Because when you think of Finnair's perspective, Neste gives legitimacy and sort of support to the sustainable aviation industry. And on the other hand, if you think of Neste's perspective, is Finnair then like supporting the biofuel industry and giving legitimacy for that? And I was wondering if this would be an example of the systemic sustainability transition taking place between industries.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. I would hope it to be a two-way street. It is it's kind of nice that we have a company like Neste in Finland. So because it's easy when you have two big companies in a small country. It's easy for us to collaborate. And yes, I mean, we have really good discussions. It's not only that they sell us fuel, but we also have discussions on how do we move this industry forward. It's a huge customer for them as well, aviation. So how do we move this forward in a way that is sustainable? We talk about the feedstock. What are sort of the raw materials that they use to produce the biofuel. We have our demands. They have sort of their offer, and we have those discussions. A lot of background noise. I'm sorry about that. Okay, thanks for muting. And then of course the future. What are the power sources in the future, and how can you make fuel? And companies like Neste are super important for us on that one. I mean, obviously, electric flying is extremely interesting and innovative, and it's a lovely topic, but that's going to be little ways in the future. And you know, airplanes live for a long time. We're just dismantling an airplane. So she retired, and now she's going to be picked up for pieces and recycled and reused. And that plane flew something like 33,000 flights. So we use them for a long time. And that means that as soon as there's, you know, electric flying, we're not going to change our whole fleet. So we need solutions that work with the existing infrastructure, that work at the existing airports and their big tanks and the planes and the engines there. And Neste is one of the companies that is very sort of actively looking into these liquid fuels from different raw materials to create almost the same product. And that is a process where we want to be participating in, and are happy to partner with Neste. I'm not sure if I answered your question now.
Yeah, I was like generally interested in this Neste collaboration, and thank you for enlightening that a bit. Thanks.
Yeah. I mean, yesterday when we flew that flight, we didn't actually have biofuel on board, but it's this book and claim system that you do. You buy the biofuel, but it's not in your plane, but you can sort of claim the emission reduction on that, which is very widely used, and it's a good system, and it's thoroughly audited and all that. But in the future, with the partnership from Neste, now we can actually get the actual biofuels in our planes from the Helsinki airport, and it's nicer. It's a cleaner and more simple system. It's a huge amount of paperwork, this book and claim, so that everybody can make sure it's legitimate. So it's going to be fantastic to continue with Neste on that.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks.
Okay, Anne, thank you so much for your time today. We have to close now, but I wanted to especially say that we are really sorry to hear what is going behind the COVID pandemic, because we understand being in that position in the tourism is really hard, and all the effort that you and the company is doing to keep being sustainable, we really highlight that, and it's really insightful for us to know that you guys are trying to keep on that. So
thank you.
Yeah, unfortunately we are out of time, but thanks so much again, everyone, for attending our Leadership for Change lecture today, and we hope you learned a lot. And thanks so much, Anne, for your words of wisdom and your time. Remember to look out for our blog post for this lecture if you want to share it. And you can find that by searching for Tampere University Leadership for Change blog. And on March 26th would be our next Leadership for Change blog lecture with Venla Roth, who has been doing work in social justice. So everyone, hope you have a great day, and it was a great time having this lecture.
Thank you very much.